Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, Alexis. How are you?
I am extremely well because this is quite a special day. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I've just completed a day of couples work. So this is the icing on the cake to spend some time with you today.
Well, yes, and we're going to be talking about your work with couples and relationships, because whatever applies to a romantic relationship, I would expect would also have application to other relationships. Is that fair to say? As in parent-child, sibling relationships, friends, co-workers?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some principles that kind of underlie all positive, thriving relationships, regardless of context. And of course, there's the important information that context brings. So, as a general rule, the rules of connection between people, interpersonal connection, is all generally the same. We all connect with people through the same verbal and non-verbal cues, and it's really the intention of the relationship or the context of the relationship that determines the language that you choose.
Beautiful. Now, language is something I know that you are particularly interested in, and I feel like that is a whole other topic that I would love to pick your brains on. But before we go any further, welcome to our listeners. And if you would like to bring someone to mind, I think that would be a helpful start for tonight. It could be a troubling relationship that you would like to improve, or it could be even a long-standing one that hasn't been sitting well. That might help you to apply some of this knowledge that you pick up tonight. Would that be fair to say, Jeremy?
Yes, absolutely.
Any other suggestions before I introduce you properly?
I think that a lot of, so your recommendation of bringing somebody to mind who you have a relationship with, perhaps as you do that, consider through one of the frames that the Gottman Institute talks about in their work, that as you see characteristics of another, try to find those characteristics within yourself as well. So,
go on. Could you give us an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're, let's assume that the person that somebody brings to mind, it doesn't really matter whether it's a positive or a negative relationship as you perceive it. The goal of seeking to find evidence of characteristics that you see in the other within yourself is really critical to beginning to identify how to better self-regulate. So what I mean by that is, if you see, let's say it's you're in a critical dynamic or a negative dynamic with somebody, and you see some quality, oh, they're so selfish, then it really helps to be able to identify that characteristic within yourself. It may not be expressed in the same way. They may be selfish in a particular circumstance, particular context, but it's very important to acknowledge that we only really see aspects of ourselves in others. And so the flip side of that is that when you see positive qualities in somebody, you also strive to see those positive qualities within yourself.
That is a fascinating topic. It's very Jungian in terms of, acknowledging the shadow, but it's also personally relevant for me because I'm quite interested in how, when we fall in love, that we're actually falling in love with ourselves. I don't know if that's something you have thoughts on, but while I have the opportunity to pick your brains, what are your thoughts?
That was very tricky of you, Alexis, not to mention this ahead of time. That is something.
Park my questions to Jeremy, and we can pick them up again later.
No, look, I think that it's a really interesting idea. The framework that I work within is always that projection makes perception, meaning that to a certain extent, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And so whether it's a direct correlation, there are characteristics that we can identify within ourselves, or perhaps there are unconscious characteristics, or perhaps there are characteristics that we see as opposite to our characteristics. In some ways, it is still all us. What that means in terms of whether you're having a relationship with somebody else, obviously, yes, there is still another human being that you are interacting with. But until you have like a really clear map of their kind of internal landscape, Gottman refers to it as love maps, then in some ways you are really just having a relationship with your own ideas and your own projections. So as we get to know people, the relationship between how somebody is in their internal world, their internal lived experience, and our experience of them becomes closer and closer and closer. Sometimes with great effect, positive effect, sometimes with detrimental effect. But for a little while, there are a lot of assumptions. We haven't had enough of a direct experience, unless you're very, very disciplined when you're meeting somebody, and you kind of approach it with an only don't know kind of frame, which means that you suspend all assumptions, all judgments, and really just kind of try to absorb as much information as you can.
Only don't know, as in keep thinking to yourself, I only don't know. Is that what you mean by?
It's kind of like a rule of thumb. Another way of saying it is just don't make assumptions. Yeah. If you do make assumptions, then just assume that what you're assuming is you.
Yeah.
For quite some time, you haven't had enough direct experience to form a clear picture of what somebody's like. And there's all sorts of dynamics that play in the relationship, the seduction game, where we have presentations of ourselves that we know have been effective in the past to kind of develop the types of connection that we want. And so it's a little bit of statesmanship, politics, until the lived experience is long enough to actually really begin to connect with the person behind those kind of social masks.
Okay, this is good. I'm getting a running list of things to raise with you anon, because this is just opening up more questions than it's closing. I'd love to share with our listeners some context, because Jeremy is one of my longest standing contemporaries, and so it's really quite precious to be here. We go back to our early business days at the turn of the millennium, which is saying something about our age, but don't do the math. Just know that we are spring chickens and looking very good for our age. And you are also the reason that I'm here, because once the lockdown lifted here in Brisbane and we could exercise again, a trio formed to run by the river twice weekly, and that trio became known as Three Musketeers, and that is, of course, the principal practitioner and clinical director of North Brisbane psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam, myself, and none other than Jeremy Gates. So you are the central figure in my partnership with Rachel, and the three of us still get together regularly, and it's one of my most fun dynamics. I think we all bring just the right amount of naughty. So I'm really honoured to be here. And like I said, there are so many questions that I want to hammer at you. There's something about the professional context that makes that a little more focused. So Thank you is my point. Thank you for showing up.
That's my absolute pleasure.
Now, there's a few things I wanted to touch on because I see a number of women in their late 40s to 60s, and a lot of them share dissatisfaction in their relationships, and but they do say that their partners would never see a therapist. So I thought we could use this as a little bit of an introduction to what you do that might allay some of those fears for partners. And I was thinking also that this might relate to some of our listeners who may be having a difficult relationship with a mother or a child, if you also see other kinds of relationships, but they're thinking, well, you know, I'd like to improve this relationship, but my mum is very unlikely to see a therapist, or my dad is very unlikely to. So obviously I would find it easier to refer to you being a male practitioner, and just wondered your thoughts on that and how we might allay fears.
Well, yeah, I guess there are a number of assumptions about what relationship couples therapy is. For gentlemen in particular, there's an assumption of weakness associated with kind of reaching out to a therapist. For those that, if I'm imagining the correct cohort, then just the way that boys were raised, for men who are now kind of in their 50s and 60s, it was very much, you know, don't show emotion. The only emotion that is okay is anger or happiness. So I can understand the trepidation at the idea of going and seeing somebody who they probably assume is going to try and make them talk about their feelings. The truth is that I will want to talk about your feelings, but it's less about in a completely exposed, vulnerable way to begin with, and more about a framework that identifies that feelings are the language of needs. In fact, feelings are the first language, the primal language. It's what we're kind of born with. And so the relationship that we've had as men with feelings is very toxic, because we don't have the same kind of range or socialization to expressing our feelings. And so a lot of stuff gets kind of pushed away, compressed, and judged both by ourselves and sometimes by our peers. So the process of therapy, relationship therapy, is really learning skills for communication initially. And communication is a very broad term. It's not the only thing that is going on in relationships, but it is generally something that kind of helps to have a shared language or a shared framework for communicating. And in that, I, while still working within the Gottman model, tend to lean towards nonviolent communication or needs-based communication as a preferred methodology. What this allows people to do is to begin connecting thoughts and feelings with needs. And the reason why that is so important, of course, is because needs in many ways are agnostic. They don't really care how they get met. They just need to come to the surface to be identified for what they are. And then once both parties have had their needs be made conscious, you can kind of get into a dialogue about it. I said before that needs are agnostic. What I mean is that when you have a genuine need, say, let's make it a very simple example, say you're dying of thirst. You're not really invested in how it gets met. You know, if you're in the middle of a desert and somebody's dropping bottles of water down from a helicopter, it's unlikely that you're going to be, oh, no, I can't take these. I'm sorry, they've been near a helicopter. You will accept the meeting of your need in any way that it gets presented. Now, it's not a direct correlation to those kind of higher order needs. There may be some stipulations on how they get met. However, generally, there are more options for how your needs get met than the strategies that you've employed that have had you butt heads. So it's really a little bit of psychoeducation. I realize I'm just rambling as I answer these questions.
Not rambling. It's very pertinent because nonviolent communication comes up a lot in our live streams, and needs are really the central theme across all therapeutic spaces. I hope that's not too broad a statement, but it seems to be. I mean, the reason you would see a therapist is because there is a need. So you're not rambling. It's entirely relevant. Yeah.
If I may ramble a little bit longer, then
please do.
That frame of needs, yeah, it's very important. The framework that I work within is that all behavior is communication, and that communication is a desire to have a need met.
Yeah, nice.
So,
yep. All behavior is communication. And
all behavior is communication.
And it's all to get a need met.
Yeah, it's all to get a need met. While that isn't exhaustively scientifically researched, it's a useful frame. And I think that is something that comes into play more and more as we seek to facilitate meaningful change as quickly as possible in a therapeutic context, is that we're interested in using useful frames. So just to close off on the question about luring males into the relationship therapy chair, the key selling point is that it facilitates those male clients getting their needs met equally to the female partner. A good relationship therapist is completely neutral, and the frame that I work within is that the relationship itself is the client. And so each party has equal responsibility for the dynamic that exists in that relationship, and equal responsibility for ensuring that it's healthy. Luckily, thanks to the work of the Gottman Institute, we have frameworks, scientifically proven frameworks for interventions, structures, systems that have been proven to work, proven to move relationships that are struggling towards thriving relationships. And time again, I've seen where two parties are willing, where they're both willing, just absolutely remarkable transformations just through the introduction of skills and understanding of the relationship between communication and needs, and some frameworks around communicating requests or strategies for getting those needs met.
Wow, okay. So that segues into my next question, which is that most couples, I imagine, come to see you when they're on the rocks. What are the chances of turning that around? I mean, but you've answered it. It depends upon the willingness of both parties and their ability to apply the skills, is what I'm taking from it.
Yeah, the willingness to first learn the skills, really understand the skills and apply them, and the assumption that relationships, like a majority of my clients, are absolutely in distress. That said, I have worked with clients where both parties have independently given the likelihood of the relationship remaining together a 1% chance. And they really kind of turned toward the work. We're both really willing to work on the relationship. For them, it was due diligence, like a last-ditch attempt. But what they found through being able to understand the behavior of their partner as, them just seeking to get their needs met, employing strategies that probably worked in a whole variety of other contexts, but for whatever reason didn't work with them, it really just kind of opened something up. They're able to give each other the benefit of the doubt. I do still have a proportion of clients that see me for skills that they want to take into a relationship. Oftentimes having either had an unsuccessful marriage or a major kind of breakup after a long-term relationship, where they recognize that they didn't handle it particularly well, or they've come across Gottman and they're like, let's carry this stuff forward. Preventative care.
Right.
You're a great proponent of preventative medicine. This really is the kind of stuff that should be taught in schools, and that's one of the things that I feel really committed to trying to get underway to facilitate, is to get kids learning these skills ahead of time, because without them, it seems ridiculous. It seems ridiculous that we would teach biology, physics, and when we have this scientifically proven body of work on what constitutes the ingredients of healthy relating, and we don't teach it. It's a phenomenal waste. It's really quite a shame. Does that answer your question?
It just adds another thing to my list to discuss, communication in the education system. But yeah, I would love to touch on what you suggested with the 1%, the couple that suggested that it had a 1% chance of survival, because I have a particular interest in the way that relationships end. And I know there is some thinking amongst psychotherapists that if we can't close off relationships well, then, are we really living in a peaceful society? If such a simple everyday happening is fraught with anger and pain and damage, as I know personally you and I have experienced, what does that say about the society that we're living in? And my experience through transforming that uncoupling process has been very, very deep and powerful. And so I'm thinking of referring people to you for that process of learning to use needs-based communication, as you've described, to be able to release fully and understand the positioning as best we can. This may not always be 100% understanding, but to do that lovingly, gently, carefully, compassionately, so that there's as little damage to not only the couple, but the family, the kids, and the list goes on. Is that something you would advocate for?
I think that, like all therapy is ultimately where you meet the limit of your skill. And if you're in a situation which is completely unfamiliar, oftentimes, you described a family breaking apart. Hopefully, people don't have too much experience with that. Oftentimes,
anytime a couple separate, there's still family affected. Even if it's circles of friends or parents, even if there are no children, there's still other people affected by that uncoupling.
Yeah, I guess as a general rule, if you're at the limit of your skill and you're not kind of feeling that you have communicated what you need to in order to close the loop, if it doesn't feel that you're able to release the energy that that relationship occupies in your time and attention, then absolutely, seeing a therapist can help to contextualize, to normalize the experience. They may even be able to offer some insight into why it didn't work. While it is not, recognized as being particularly scientific, I like to get my couples to take the MBTI to get their Myers-Briggs personality types, and sometimes that just exchanging the values that are present in that, and kind of going, oh well, he's an introvert, you're an extrovert. It's not high science, I know that, but it can be enough just to kind of allow somebody to come to rest. One thing that is very important about kind of unresolved mental and emotional loops, unclosed loops, is that they do occupy mental and emotional energy. And I believe that it's very, very important that you close off your historical loops before you begin opening new ones. So it's kind of like, end before you start. The overlap model that some people adopt, where they're perpetually in relationship and they never get a chance to kind of close off and grieve, really just opens, keeps emotional loops open, and that can lead to mental overwhelm. It can contribute to stress and anxiety, as the mental and emotional energy kind of gets chewed up in the background. At the very least, it can influence your capacity to be fully present to what's occurring in your relationship in real time.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I'm noticing that there are certain times when people are more likely to be motivated to work on themselves, and it seems that the close or the ending of a relationship or the starting of a relationship are some opportune times to pick up some of these skills that you're talking about. But it also brings to mind our discussion earlier today when we were running through the myriad of topics we could discuss around this myth that we need to love ourselves before we can love others. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think?
I think that the principle is true, in that the loving qualities need to be present. If we kind of loop back to the beginning, I was saying that it's really important to be able to see qualities that you see in another person, within yourself. There is certainly in my therapeutic experience a very strong correlation between people that value themselves and healthy boundaries. And so what I would say is that idea that you need to love yourself, if it is the method or the mental and emotional space that you are in, where you're able to apply intelligent boundaries, self-protective boundaries, respectful boundaries, then absolutely you need to love yourself before you can be loved by somebody else. The frame that I prefer is that if you're really going to focus on something of value, then learn to take responsibility for yourself, for your thinking, your feeling, and your actions. Think, feel, do. The reason being is that you can still be in a state where you don't particularly necessarily even like yourself, but you can put healthy boundaries in place. And I really see that is key. Like, understanding where you end and they begin is a really important factor in having a healthy, thriving relationship.
I love that. I really like that framework, knowing where you end and someone else begins, and that is the boundary. Yeah.
I see self-love as the emotional space, self-respect as the mental space. And the combination of those two things kind of creates a wisdom of recognizing your own value. So may not be everyone's cup of tea. For me, it's just a useful frame that helps to distinguish that even when you don't love yourself, you can still interact, you can still have a healthy relationship, but you need to be able to put healthy boundaries in place for that to exist. It could very well be that you haven't had a direct experience of somebody that can model self-love. It's maybe something that you're learning, but you can still interact with love. It doesn't need to limit the ability to receive love.
So are you suggesting that that it is possible to receive love from someone, even if we don't fully love ourselves, and that the facilitator of that is a healthy boundary? Is that your suggestion, Jeremy? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
well, that's how I understand it.
Mm,
The understanding, absolutely, you can receive love from other people. I
mm,
guess it's whether you recognize that that's what it is.
mm,
There does need to be a kind of an understanding of what it feels like to have love within you, to be able to fully receive it,
mm,
and understand that is what that thing is. It doesn't mean that you need to have it. It's I know we're kind of getting into minutiae in some way.
They're constructs, they're frameworks, which hopefully our listeners can relate to. I mean, I'm thinking about a number of clients who have had, a history of trauma, and there is, in certain areas, a real sense that they're not lovable in a particular way or in a particular area of their lives. I mean, I'm even thinking about when these clients have been asked to draw their bodies, and there's certain areas that are dark or spiky or ugly, and so it's interesting that you're saying that it's still possible to receive love, even if there's a part of myself that I don't love. And that makes sense to me, so long as I've had enough experience of love. And this is where the therapeutic relationship can help, because the therapeutic relationship is deeply loving. And if that's where I can experience a form of love, then I can hopefully translate that to other ways. So if I can recognize, oh yeah, that's what love feels like when I'm touched in a certain way, when I've given empathy in a certain way, when somebody can help me to validate myself, then perhaps I could just let that spill into an area of myself that I'm not so loving with. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the woman that kind of formed the basis of me. For a very long time, I believe that you had to love yourself to be able to experience love, to be in a loving relationship, and she taught me through her lived experience that in some ways she was kind of loved to life. That there was somebody that had learned to love aspects of themselves that were present in the other. And so they were kind of able to kind of show like leadership or to mentor them toward more deeply loving and embracing themselves.
Would you mind just saying that again, Jeremy? Because there's something I'd really like to catch that, and I didn't quite. You're thinking about a woman who, would you mind?
So a woman, a woman who experienced that didn't have any self-love.
Didn't have any self-love.
She was full of self-judgment and self-loathing, and she entered a relationship with somebody that had learned to love the aspects of themselves that she wasn't able to love within herself.
Okay, yeah. So she was in a relationship with someone who was self-loving in a way that she wasn't loving with herself. Okay, yeah.
That's right. And so she was able to really to learn how to love those aspects of herself, and to at the very least kind of accept her ambivalence around certain aspects of herself. The goal of self-love is always there, absolutely. I guess perhaps what I'm saying is not so much that. Sorry, I'll move toward it rather than away from it. What I'm saying is that it's still also very important to have a level of intelligence and a level of wisdom. What I see as a truly kind of thriving relationship is where there's a balance of the head and the heart. So we're not just kind of like all heart and no brains, or, you know, this makes perfect intellectual sense. Why can't I love this person who's, you know, all these things on the spreadsheet, you know, ticks all the boxes? That's not it either. So it's that balance, that wisdom of the head and the heart in balance. So again, I just kind of feel like I'm throwing spaghetti at you.
No. It's all very valid, all relevant to your top tips on relationships. But I would love to step it back, because where we were was something quite new and integrated for me, and I think it brings this to a lovely close, around valuing ourselves. Sounds like a theme amongst your work, and certainly our conversation. And you're even answering my question around, you know, when we fall in love, are we really loving ourselves? And you're answering your own question around, can we receive love from someone if we don't love ourselves? Or I think it's often posed as, should I be in a relationship, you know, if I'm not really loving myself? I think that's often how it's contextualized. And where I'm landing with it through this discussion is that through being in relationship, and we do this with each other all the time, we get to see how somebody demonstrates love, how somebody is experiencing love. And just through that experience, which I believe is an experiential, it's a kinesthetic experience, it's sensory, and that's really where all experience resides, that I can locate and experience and come to know what that is, and own it for myself, so that even as the relationship, you know, separates and goes about their daily lives, that if I've had enough experience of it, then that's then mine to own. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jeremy, that being in relationship, seeing how you love yourself, helps me to know that I can love myself in the same way, essentially?
I definitely believe that we can model self-love, self-kindness, self-value, self-respect. I definitely believe that we can help people to more deeply connect with feelings of acceptance, of awareness, perhaps of self-love also, through our acceptance of aspects of them. The kinesthetic kind of experience, in some ways I feel is inspired by the other person, but kind of completed within ourselves. Like, obviously there is the base kinesthetic physical touch type stuff. There's the stimulus, if somebody's communicating with us through our preferred love language, it's kind of, you know, ticking all the boxes. That's fantastic. But ultimately the meaning that we attribute to that, that kind of overlay is that remains with us. That's our responsibility. And so I'm not sure if I quite grasped the kinesthetic thing that you keep with you or you take away from you, but I would say that kind of mental and emotional object is something that you have helped craft. And maybe maybe your capacity through the meanings that you give things is how you better create that feeling of self-love, by allowing more and more things to be confirmation that you deserve that. It's a big topic, Alexis.
I just love where we land. We usually land in a place of, right, well, we started with 2 questions and we've now got 200 questions and some very unusual facial expressions. Which is the beauty of the mind and the human. My client said to me yesterday, she gave me a long story. She covered history and family, and she covered so much ground. At the end, she looked at me and she said, am I just too complex? As in, you know, what am I beyond? Am I beyond helping? And all I could say was, look, I find complexity absolutely exquisite. And it's my mission to try and simplify, which is never satisfying. I mean, even in this conversation, I'm going to reflect back on it. I'll be listening to it going, Alexis, you've oversimplified. But it's an attempt to convert that experience, that complexity of being a human into something, just something that I can make sense of. So I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation as always, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. We are a little over time, but is there anything you are burning to share with our listeners in relation to working with couples? If any of our listeners are keen to bring their mums in, to bring their teenage children in, to bring their dads in, any last words of wisdom?
Yes, thank you, Alexis. In closing, I would like to say a very succinct thing.
Please, I'm looking forward to it. It will be the only time I've ever heard you speak succinctly.
I would say that your capacity to have thriving relationship is really determined by your skill. And if you haven't had mentors or people that you can model or mirror in your family of origin or your lived experience, then learning distinct skills that have been researched scientifically will be very, very advantageous. I certainly know that as I was doing my Gottman training, the lights were coming on all of the extraordinary mistakes that I'd made in relationship up until that point. And certainly in terms of moving forward, it helps me to contextualize and understand my child's behavior, my colleagues' behavior, and even my own behavior. So get into it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I've just added to the list that one day I'd love to hear your story, Jeremy, in this space, because you have quite a remarkable story and you're a living example of the words that you preach. If you're interested, anybody, in getting some relationship support, come and see Jeremy. And skill up.
Skill up, that's it. Do the drills, get the skills.
Speaking of which, we do have some workshops coming up on emotional intelligence. We have 3 Sundays, the 16th of June, 24th of July, and the 7th of August. I just need to look at my whiteboard on that one. And so it's 9:30 to 12:30. We're doing 3 mornings, and you'll have the opportunity to practice some of these skills that then are applied in relationship context. Down the track, we're also doing some more work around relationship and making marriage work. And if you would like to see Jeremy in a workshop space, then leave some comments and give us some tips on what areas you'd like to cover, because I get the sense there is so much more here. I could be convinced to do some workshops.
Promise I'll be more succinct.
Please don't.
It's my first time. I'm a rookie, okay?
You did beautifully.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for joining, and until we officially open for our emotional intelligence workshops at 6 p.m. So there will be 15 minutes from now that you can get your tickets, open only to our Facebook loyal listeners, and otherwise we would love to see you guys in the flesh, so please get your tickets and show on up. Jeremy, we will see you again in this space very soon, and I have a long list of questions for you.
Thank you, Alexis. I look forward to answering those.
Stunning. Okay, ciao then. Enjoy your Sunday. Bye.
Thank you, you too.